I woke up to silence. A note on the table. My wife gone. No calls, no messages. I'd been ghosted. But by Monday, I'd lost more than her. My job, my life's work, stolen. By her and my best friend. I thought it was just betrayal, but they did something worse. They erased me completely.